Hi everyone and welcome to your horoscope for the week of July the 19th, 2021. We have a really active and powerful sky with two very important energy shifts, a very contemplative and also philosophical new moon in the sign of Aquarius on the 23rd or 24th of July depending on where on the planet you live. And of course, the magic, the aura of mystery and artistic inspiration this week is going to be provided by the harmonious conversation Mercury and Neptune hold together. There is a lot of inspirational, motivational, deeply spiritual, psychologically empowering, and at the same time like really practical problem solving energy in the sky. That is absolutely true, but of course none of this means that things are already stable, they're following their course, everything is working like clockwork, because that is definitely not the case. We're still under the continuous influence of the Saturn and Uranus square, and as I said in so many times in previous horoscopes, this is the overall tone, the overall energetic configuration of the year 2021. A year of profound and almost forced change, so to speak. So as long as this celestial conversation is active, at any given moment, regardless of any other celestial configurations, individually we can expect a lot of surprises, a lot of unexpected events, unexpected twists and turns of current events, small things that irritate us, that challenge us, and of course, for some people, bigger things as well. For example, problems that are a permanent part of their lives, of their everyday normality. Now, of course, we are going to be all the time challenged by these small or big problems, but we must also learn not to take these things very personally, because this is just Uranus. It is basically a certain kind of truth, which is part of who it is that we are, who it is that we are embodying. That truth, something about us, something about our individuality, our life story, always makes its presence, its importance known, by creating certain random, chaotic, maybe unexpected events, which hold a very powerful truth about us and who it is that we are. So, first of all, this Saturn and Uranus square, especially individually speaking, makes sure that we never ever forget that very important truth that is always being highlighted and crystallized. Like, let me just give you a practical example. Some people find this year extremely challenging within their connection, relationships, what happens on social media, their position in society. For example, they might receive a lot of criticism, a lot of unfairness, people not understanding them, being tolerant with them, etc. Or they might see a lot of challenges where they might share an opinion and people just harass them on the internet, of course. And even though these are like unpleasant events, which can be extremely irritating, the essence why this pattern keeps on recurring one after another all throughout 2021 is because it wants to highlight that there is a powerful tension between, for example, your individual value system and the collective value system. And each and every time you get challenged by other people, it just highlights the difference between the two. And even though this energy is extremely annoying, challenging, there is only so much reminder of something that someone needs, if you know what I'm saying. But that is why this energy is so predominant, because every single time we make any choice, any option, express any preference, or accept or decline something, or perhaps we take a smaller risk, we need to be always aware and conscious about the tension, the difference between our own value system and that of the external world, so to speak. Because only this way are we responsible for our choices and the happiness that they need to provide for us personally and individually. But of course, how this square plays out is very unique to every single person. Some people might have totally different kind of challenges. For some people it is just an internal process where they decide on something and then go back and then they start back at the drawing board at square zero and, rebuild this plan, this tactics once again. Then something suddenly happens which changes everything, and you might feel that you're not getting anywhere, that this is just a continuous loop like an error in the system. But in truth, it is just showing you that this is how energies align. It isn't something that happens instantly. It is like a continuous attempt to align, to reflect the truth. And the more, the two opposing elements begin harmonizing with each other, while the less tension, the less conflict, chaos the square is going to create. When, things are starting to quiet down, it means that the harmony is much greater, it has a greater expression, so it no longer comes as a challenge or as an obstacle which you cannot overcome. But as I said, for every single person this is different. For some, as I said, it is a material thing. Some might not really be able to decide on their next or future career. For other people, it's within their relationships. For others, their partnerships. For others, their spirituality, their philosophic take on their world. So, this is really different for everyone. And what I want to say here is that as annoying, as uncomfortable, as irritating this energy can be, because it's continuous all throughout 2021, it actually serves a very high purpose. These are very unusual times because we can understand this Uranus as our higher selves, as our unlimited intelligence that we also embody, trying its hardest to keep us aligned to what truth is for us individually. It would be so very easy if this energy would just, let's say, pop up once and then just deliver the message and leave us in ignorance, allowing us to make misjudgments, mistakes, errors, all the small mistakes that a human being can make. But this is where this energy is staying with us all the time, making sure that we never ever forget the most important lessons, experiences, and our own personal truth, regardless of their nature. But fortunately, this week we're going to have energies which are really going to help with this. They are healing, regenerative, nurturing, especially psychologically, spiritually, and emotionally. So this is one of those weeks when we can really basically tap into really profound emotional, psychological, and spiritual nurture, regardless if that is provided, let's say, by the divine forces, by another person, by someone who we deeply love, or by just us providing it for ourselves. It is really, really like a respite, like a rest, like a period of regeneration. We start the week with a really powerful water trine, which is deeply nurturing and regenerative. The Sun from Cancer, the Neptune from Pisces, and the Moon from Scorpio trine each other. Even though this is a very short-term aspect because the Moon moves on very quickly, it can still give us a real big emotional, spiritual, and psychological boost to just embody the strength of our faith, our highest dreams, principles, and ideals that we need to keep us going all throughout the week. Now, at the same time, we do have a tensionate aspect where the Sun opposes Pluto. This is where we are being reminded of where it is that we are powerless, where it is that we may not have a lot of influence, a lot of power over, for example, relationships, or at least one area of our lives, where things either depend on the course of fate, Pluto, or it might depend on other people or external factors like, for example, Pluto in Capricorn can symbolize the government, institutions, or how we are interconnected within society and the power and the hierarchy that ultimately influences our lives. But this isn't such a fresh energy because Mars was here, Venus was here, and now it's the Sun's turn to, face this opposition. Which means that whatever truth this has to highlight, it's nothing new, we already were processing it. And this energy is going to resume as soon as Mercury replaces the Sun in this opposition. And that might be a moment when we truly process and take in the lesson, the truth in it. Because ultimately it is Mercury which translates anything that happens to us into information we can process, take in, and of course, use all throughout our lives. Now, speaking about Mercury, also at around the beginning of the week, Mercury is going to hold a really strong sextile, a harmonious celestial conversation, which does require us to take some action or to follow up inspiration with something practical. So Mercury holds this conversation with its higher octave Uranus. And this is a really, really good energy for communication, for breakthrough, for sudden realizations, epiphanies. This is also really powerful psychological energy because Uranus in Taurus is value system, everything that has to do with our self-worth and what we think about ourselves, our lives, the stability and structure of our lives, and also our material situation. While this Mercury in the sign of Cancer now is emotional intelligence and the power we possess over our feelings. Or in another way to express this, how much power we give our feelings to basically influence our lives and decision-making processes. So this sextile between Mercury and its higher octave Uranus, this is both an intellectual, a mental, but at the same time emotional energy as well. This can play out as a surprise, as an unexpected communication, as someone revealing something to us which we will find extremely helpful. It can also be a really positive and unexpected feedback or a really, really good advice, a constructive criticism. It can also be like just an inner epiphany where suddenly, unexpectedly you figure stuff out. This can also play out as some kind of really supportive, inspirational, a kind gesture coming from, for example, family, people who you consider as family, people who you have strong emotional connections with. It can also be someone from the past. This can also influence your financial situation because Uranus is in the sign of Taurus. So it really, really destabilizes that part of the sky. But destabilizing, as I said, chaos has also really creative and constructive sides to it as well. It takes, of course, with great, great ease in a second, in an instant, but it can also give the same way. So potentially this can be a very, very lucky aspect for some people regarding, investments, the right choice to make regarding money, finances, any kind of business, speculative activities, especially financially speaking, like cryptocurrencies, where to invest, what new things to try out, for example. And naturally, this can also represent who it is that we have to team up with. Who is the right person, the right professional, the right friend or acquaintance or simply connection who can advantage us the most. Now at the same time, Venus is holding an outer sign opposition to Jupiter. Venus is in the last degrees of the sign of Leo, and this can represent our deepest desires, especially everything that makes our heart burn with passion, with gratitude, everything that we desire and ultimately need in our lives, regardless of the nature of our desires. That is what Venus in this part of the sky symbolizes. And this makes Venus extremely magnetic, extremely attractive, metaphysically of course. And when she opposes Jupiter, well, Jupiter expands everything that Venus symbolizes, making the desire that much stronger, almost irresistible, greatly expanding it. And this energy has a good side to it, but of course it can also have a bad side. The good side is, well, manifestation. Dream big. And of course express it. Fight for what you desire. Fight for your dreams. And it can actually come into your life in a excessive way, so to speak, because Jupiter is excess when it starts expanding something. But of course, the negative expression is be very careful what you wish for, because if something just shows up in your life excessively, it will take a lot of, self-discipline to manage it in such a way that it doesn't harm you or destabilize you in any way, shape, or form. This is where we have to embody our inner Saturn. And the other expression, well, if it is unhappiness, misery, unmet needs that you're focusing on very strongly, well, Jupiter can just make that grow and grow and grow, so you'll have more of that and not really the fulfillment. Now, this energy is gonna get a little bit more intense on the 21st of July, because this is the moment when Venus is anaretic, so at 29 degrees. Any planet which is in this degree has its symbolism greatly amplified, and usually it is its shadow aspects which are more predominant. And it isn't just Venus who is in 29 degrees, but also the Sun in the sign of Cancer. So this means a really powerful emotional charge, emotional vulnerability, or this might be a moment when our needs and desires really have us almost consumed, sucked into this emotional game. But this energy doesn't have to be anything bad as long as we know how not to allow it to get out of hand, get out of control. Now on the 22nd, the next day, we have the powerful energy shifts, where first of all the Sun enters into the sign of Leo, leaving Cancer. So I would like to wish a very happy birthday month for all Leo natives. This energy shift is always really positive. The Sun enters into its home sign of Leo. This is the part of the sky where its symbolism is at its strongest. The sign of Leo is all about the heart, the self, the ego, who it is that we are, our self-expression, our creativity, our inner child. It is, the part of ourselves, the light of our consciousness that we radiate, we share with others, we project onto others. So usually every single year, this energy is one of the most optimistic ones. It is an energy, of course, of siesta, of rest, allocating time to yourself, to your needs, to whatever makes your heart happy, to the inner child. A lot of people instinctually plan their vacations, the moments of rest, around the time when the Sun enters into its home sign of Leo. Because this is also the energy of pleasure. This is also the energy of focusing on yourself. So it's a really good idea to combine it with the practical expressions of the inner impulse, like for example taking time to be with yourself, to do all the things you like doing, to relax, to enjoy life, to dedicate resources to pleasure, fulfilling your heart's desires, playing with other people, spending time with other people, shining your light, creating, expressing yourself artistically, creatively, or however you like. This energy shift is followed by Venus moving into the sign of Virgo and leaving the sign of Leo. Now, even though Venus is not able to bring out her very best qualities in the sign of Virgo, this is the part of the sky where she is in fall debilitated. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially under the present circumstances, because basically it gives us a much greater emotional control. Venus in the sign of Virgo is not so passionate, she is not so sensual, not everything is about joy, love, beauty, lightheartedness, philosophies and ideals. In the sign of Virgo, she has to be extremely practical. She has to think about her independence, her dignity, how her relationships serve her in a practical manner, not in a philosophical, platonic manner. So basically the principle of love and beauty meets rationality, meets a very cold intellectual energy, and these two have to form an alliance. But given the fact that every other aspect points to emotional intensity, especially Mars, and this full moon that we're having, I'm going to be speaking about these just in a little bit. So because these aspects are going to provide a very strong emotional concentration, vulnerability, but at the same time, very strong passion, Venus being a little bit colder, more practical, more down to earth than usual, is actually a good addition to this energy. Basically, this is the part of the sky where we can judge more correctly, fairly, more equitably, so to speak, what inner and outer resources like time and our energy we allocate to service of others, for example, work or what we give to other people, and what we allocate and dedicate to serving the self. And of course, as Venus enters into the sign of Virgo, immediately she holds the opposition with Jupiter, the same opposition she held outer sign when she was an anoretic Leo. So this energy basically is also like a wake-up call that we need to find so many solutions to our everyday life problems. For example, our everyday routines, work, regardless of what work means to us personally. It doesn't have to be like a job. Anything in our lives that comes through as work, as sacrifice of anything. This is where we also have to focus on our physical well-being, our health, our, let's say, Virgo immune system, our digestive tract. If there are certain routines, regardless of their nature, which kind of block us or prevent our freedom, prevent our greater good, for example, like smoking, addictions, escapism, or any other way where we might be poisoning our bodies or preventing our own well-being, this moment is always good for a detox or for a good attempt to try and break those routines, those unhealthy patterns. And Jupiter is extremely helpful because it highlights, it expands all the bad, all the harm our unhealthy routines cause in our lives, and that helps the lessons sink in even deeper, and it motivates us to take action and try to detox, cleanse, or, try to get a much more balanced lifestyle. Now on the 23rd of the month, we have Mercury speaking in supreme harmony with Neptune. Mercury in the sign of Cancer, Neptune in the sign of Pisces. So this is a water trine. This is without a shadow of a doubt a really good inspirational creative energy for artists, healers, spiritualists, everyone who basically works with any kind of Cancerian expression, for example, nurture, healthcare, psychology, coaching, helping and inspiring others, or Neptunian, for example, artists, any kind of artistic expression, music, crafts, arts, hobbies, singing, poetry. So this can represent a very productive energy, artistic inspiration, a big breakthrough. Mercury has also a lot to do with trade, with the circulation of energies, even from a material perspective. So this can be really good for new business, new customers, to attract those people who truly value your work, who appreciate your efforts, or your unique artistic expression. It is also good to launch new artistic projects under this energy. And of course, to try out new ways of artistic expression, ones which you might not have tried until this moment. So this energy is also very helpful for experimenting. From a very non-material perspective, this can also represent visions, dreams, prophecy, emotional healing and empowerment, where it can come from a person, especially someone from your past. It can just come from your soul, from your higher self, Neptune, the divine source. But it can also come from your family or basically the community which you belong to. Now, moving on the 24th of July, we have this full moon in the sign of Aquarius at around 1 degree and 26 minutes. Now, like every single full moon, this as well represents the culmination of the lunar cycle. It represents either a completion, a manifestation, a termination, an ending, something reaching fruition, depending on where 1 degree and 26 minutes of Aquarius are in your personal chart. But there is also a different expression every single new moon has to it, which represents clarity, which represents truth, or it can also represent the light of your consciousness, being able to look at something which was kind of concealed or hidden from your sight. Now, collectively speaking, this new moon is very clear how it might play out. The sign of Aquarius is basically the unity of the people. The moon is the collective emotion. So, like the previous full moons, this one also has emotions, feelings rising high, correlated to it. And whenever a group of people are emotionally triggered, so to speak, well, we know without a doubt how that will manifest. Protests, legal battles, battles on social media, especially social media Aquarius. Important things happening on the internet which will definitely trigger people emotionally. For example, censorship. Censoring the right of speech, the right of self-expression, opinions, etc. This will definitely be part of the deal and it will trigger people badly. Of course, it will also represent certain things reaching the light of day, revelation, disclosure, truth, further investigations. Also, what is going to be revealed is new technologies, the sudden and very quick advancement of science, new solutions, new technological inventions, new ways of sharing data, information, communication, seeing the light of day. And when I say new, this isn't all that new, because basically this just reflects the technological and scientific advancement that we as a collective, the sign of Aquarius, have already achieved since the 21st of December 2020, when the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn took place at 0 degrees of the sign of Aquarius. So this full moon also sheds light on what exactly happened in the world from that moment onward, how that really strong and massive karmic moment opening the next cycle of 20 years and at the same time the next 200 years, how the start of that already, basically took place in the world collectively and also in our lives individually. This will be like a philosophical moment for all of us, as I said, both individually and collectively, of how the Great Conjunction, the birth of the new paradigm, already transformed our lives, our normality, our world, and absolutely everything in it. Especially social media, internet, the way we communicate, the way we relate to each other, our own connections, our own, Aquarius is humanitarianism, fraternity, equality, freedom. So all of these issues. And at the same time, this full moon, especially the moon at 1 degree of Aquarius, is sandwiched between Pluto still in Capricorn and Saturn in Aquarius. And this reminds us of the Saturn and Pluto conjunction which took place on the 12th of January 2020. An extremely rare once in 500 years celestial event, which without even a shadow of a doubt deconstructed our old normality, our old structures, and changed our world in an instant by creating a huge global crisis. This full moon also evokes back the memories, everything that happened in our lives after the 12th of January 2020, and how those events, may they be personal choices or how our worldview, our philosophies changed, our perceptions changed, how all those things led to our lives being the way it is in the present moment. So we have a lot to think of, we have a lot to process, we have a lot to analyze, but at the same time Aquarius is very, very future-oriented energy. So it also gives us the ability to anticipate how this influences our future, our hopes and dreams, and our years of retirement, basically. Around this full moon, Mars is going to be holding a quincunx with Pluto, and whenever these two planets hold a hard aspect with each other, well, the issue is going to be about power. How much power, influence, saying do we actually have in our own lives, of course, but also as individual components of a whole. Now, whatever is likely to stir up the emotions of people at the time of this full moon is going to get much more intense, because at around the same time, Mars is holding a trine with Eris in the sign of Aries, Mars' own ruling sign. And Eris is the sister of Mars, the female fighter, the female awakener, the revolutionary, the rebel, goddess of chaos, basically. And whenever she holds a trine, or in fact any planet which holds a trine with Mars, is energized. So Eris is exactly the freedom fighter who gets a lot of power pumped into her by Mars in the sign of Leo. So the heart is gonna be extremely powerful, almost like an alchemical reactor, a motor pumping sheer strength, will, and determination into us in at least one area of our lives. Which means that all of us are going to be extremely determined, motivated, and aligned with our immediate purposes. And for those people who want to oppose everything and everyone that is limiting their happiness, basically, so, the legal system, the government, you name it. Well, those people are definitely going to be on the streets, greatly empowered emotionally. But at the same time, this isn't enough. Eris is squaring Pluto. And even though this is a very long-term aspect, it's been going on all throughout 2020, 2021, even the first half of 2022. Yet every single time when any other planet or something happened which energized, made this square extremely potent, we saw violent outbursts, big protests, outlashings, even conflict between law enforcement and people, uninspired, desperate gestures from people, explosions, etc. So this is one of those moments when around the full moon that will be a main theme. And at the same time, if all of this wasn't enough, both Eris and Mars hold trines with the galactic center from Sagittarius, which is pure creational energy. It is basically the divine creative source empowering both of these planets. So Mars, planet of action, war, the male principle, and Eris, the female symbolism of all of this. So both of these planets are doers. They are action oriented. They will immediately react or take action. So this grand fire trine will definitely heat up spirits, and it will be a moment of great intensity when people will truly fight against the injustices or what they perceive as a threat with everything that they got. And what Mars in the sign of Leo adds to this is they're not just fighting for themselves, their beings basically, they're also fighting, Leo, for their children, for the future generation, for the young and vulnerable, for those who are way too young to, be able to stand up for themselves right now. But of course, another expression of this energy is totally different, where, the galactic center is in the sign of Sagittarius, the home of Jupiter, divine justice, our highest philosophies, and ultimately that our perceptions create our reality. So when we want to change our reality, we need to change our perceptions and the delicate balance that is responsible for that. So a lot of people, especially those who are really, really open-minded, those who are spiritual, and when I say spiritual, it's actually spiritual and not religious, because dogma blocks a lot of things. So this galactic center energizing Mars and Eris can have the effect that people will just shed off their old belief systems, but not as a crisis, as doom and gloom, as, emotional drama, which was more linked to the lunar eclipse that we had in Sagittarius on the 25th of May. That was, yes, the shedding off of belief systems, but it was very, very painful and uncomfortable. This is rather the opposite, where it comes like an inner impulse. And the way they fight against whatever they perceive as limitative, as, the source of enslavement, they're just gonna stop focusing on it. They're just gonna start on creating it, if this makes sense. Like, for example, if this world crisis, regardless of which aspects, economic, social, political, spiritual, or whatever, are the source of what makes you feel trapped, powerless, etc. Well, this is where you might not choose to take to the street and fight, but rather you just choose an inner alchemy where you say, well, this world crisis isn't really my reality, it isn't my creation, it isn't even my world, it has nothing to do with me, so I'll just put up a barrier of negation that will eventually starve the emotional power, for example, that all of this world crisis has over the person. And all of this can represent a totally different but authentic expression of someone's freedom. So one way or another, this grand fire trine can be quite life-changing, because when Eris is energized both by Mars and the galactic center, well, this can help us, motivate us, inspire us, or give us the courage, the guts, a moment of maximum bravery that we need to make, for example, a decision, a choice, an action, something to change our lives profoundly, perhaps something that we never even considered to do. Because, let's say, a different kind of logic, one which was once more than valid and viable, well, it told us that if we make desperate, moves, leaps of faith and gestures, well, those would be like counter-indicated for our survival. But this time we might actually reach the conclusion that our survival, what happiness, integrity means for us personally, actually depends now from a leap of faith, because right now we would no longer put our survival in danger, but quite the contrary. This is where we actually choose our survival, because when everything around us changed, we also need to change our adaptation and our survival skills or coping skills, if this makes sense. So this might be a moment, as I said, at the very end of next week, but going into the remaining of July, where we can see a lot of people like doing gestures that are very atypical to who they used to be until this moment. For example, we might see very big professionals, career people suddenly stopping and leaving their jobs, leaving their careers. We might also see people selling their property and moving away to a more less populated areas, or where nature dominates. Or we might see certain people just go through powerful life changes that they will initiate. And chances are, because Mars is in the sign of Leo, we might also see this playing out on the world stage. Celebrities, VIPs, public people, some of them will make such big gestures. So this is definitely going to be a moment when we are starting to practically process, work with everything that the past eclipses and the past perfection of the Saturn-Uranus square produced in our lives. Where it is that we didn't have clarity, where we were confused under a shroud of mystery. It is those things that we start to make sense of. This is also a time because due to that clarity, due to that understanding of the self or any other area of life, important karmic events will start entering in our lives to reflect the inner changes, transformation, upgrades, or certain terminations. People who had to give up on things or lost things, relationships, or whatever that is, will start to regenerate. Things will start showing up in their lives to give them a sense of direction, a solution, a clarity, whatever it is that they need. And at the same time, Jupiter retrograding back into the sign of Aquarius, a sign which it basically just jumped through, because Jupiter entered into Aquarius on the 21st of December 2020, and at the last weeks of May it was already in its home sign of Pisces. So it barely spent half a year in this part of the sky, which is extremely unusual because Jupiter usually spends about a year in a sign. And this year it was like lightning fast. It almost teleported all through Aquarius. So things happened so very, very quickly, and now it has to retrograde back in order to kind of finish what it started, reconfigure what has to be reconfigured, to connect you with who you need to be connected with. Because regardless of where Aquarius is in your personal chart, it is still an energy of interpersonal connections, friends, acquaintances, so other people that will definitely be part of the deal. And at the same time, Jupiter, regardless of how we look at it, well, it is still divine justice, and especially in its home sign of Pisces, it's still in it. A lot of people will have this feeling that divine justice did something in their lives. So basically, this is the overall energy of next week. Thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed it and you found it useful. Until next time, bye for now.